Good evening and welcome to Wisdom Wednesdays. Today is our 25th, believe it or not, 25th episode of the Wisdom Wednesdays. As you all know, we started during lockdown, COVID lockdown last year, and it's an amazing milestone. And what I want to say is congratulations to our team, because without whom we would not be able to do this, and the dedication that they have shown to ensure that we continue this show. And today's show is about empowered women empower women. And that is so true of this panel, even if I say so myself. We have all gone through the mill. We have all had our share of ups and downs. I think, some people feel a bit threatened by strong women. But I think all of us here on this panel actually admire strong women, because you can be so much more, and the belief people have in themselves to be strong is amazing. Strong women stand up for themselves, and stronger women stand up for other women. The question isn't who is going to let you, but who is going to stop you, said Ayn Rand. Strong women have such an impact on our lives that we can't help but be moved by them. Actually, that stands for all of us here. We so admire strong women. And you quite possibly have been raised by a strong woman and has had a strong female role model in your life. And if that is the case, you are the lucky one, because that helped shape you into the wonderful woman you are, or the wonderful woman you can actually be. So this is a great conversation today, and I don't want to hang on too long because I have something more to say at the end. I will pass you on to Soraya. Soraya will talk into the leadership roles that strong women have to play, and strong women who would want their voices heard in the big scheme of things, in the larger stage. Soraya, over to you.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you, everybody. And thank you to all the listeners who stood with us for 25 sessions. And we hope you will continue to stand with us for 25 more sessions and more. This is a phenomenal time for us to come together. If you look at governments, every government almost in the world is oppressive. And women who stood up and went to even win Nobel Prizes for peace, they fought that oppression. They restored democracy, and they gave a powerful message to all their citizens, not only in their respective countries in the world. So today, when we talk about women and power and leadership, we have to make a paradigm shift. Leadership roles won't evolve in the comfort zones of our house. You have to do something that you never did. And we, people who are promoting this, we have to support you in a way that we have never done. So it's a symbiotic relationship where two groups have to come together and infuse each other. They have to encourage each other, and we have to stand by each other. So I want to quote this statement by Wangari Maathai. I don't know if you know of her, but she's the Kenyan Nobel Peace Prize, the first African woman to win a prize. She was a Kenyan social environmentalist, and she was also a political activist. This is critical in today's times. So she was the first African American to win the Nobel Prize, and she started the Green Belt movement. And her leadership was not overnight. For 30 years, she built 30 million trees. So she planted, so this is long-term work. If you're listening in, and if you are not already in a leadership role, or if you are in a leadership role, don't be discouraged. It's going to take a long time for us to really make a collective consciousness in the people, so that we have created a meaningful difference in our world. So here's what she said after 30 years. Finally, I was able to see that I had a contribution. I wanted to make to the world. I must do it despite what others said, she said. That I was okay the way I was. That it was all right to be strong. How many women in this world are told, we are not good enough, we are not strong enough, we can't do enough? So here is a powerful message from a woman in Africa. Look at the situation in Sri Lanka. I just have to sadly make some comparisons. Just last week, the first woman DIG was told she was not good enough, right? This is not an accident. Patriarchy is mainstream in Sri Lanka. So she has to fight over that. And then look at the composition of women in Sri Lanka. 52% of the population is women, but abysmally represented in parliament. And 50% of those women are women-led households. They are widows because of the 30-year war that has taken place in Sri Lanka. And what we are doing, we have seemed to not have learned any lessons, because though the war has finished, we are still in a warlike state, when we should be focusing on how to uplift these women and how to be exemplary to these women and their children and the next generation. I don't have to mention this to you. You see where our country is stagnated in a precipice, unable to come out because of certain kinds of leadership that is not healthy for our country. And if you look around the world, women who are leading currently, Jacinta Ardern in New Zealand, Sanna Marin in Finland, and then Angela Merkel, who just resigned, they are solid examples. But we, my friends, we have a long way to go, because women in our society today have been taught, they're not even being told, they are taught that they are not, they can't do it. So how can we change this is something that we have to ask. One of the things we can do mostly is to popularize and democratize this idea that women have to be leaders and we have to support one another. And I tell this story again and again. In the United States, I remember my first political meeting, I went in and everybody wrote a check to the candidate. And I was a student then. I didn't have money, but I remember writing a small check because I knew if I wanted her to win, I had to support her financially, because these things cost money, and building power to reaching out people cost money. So how can we create a culture where we mentor these young girls and women and really uplift them? And I saw, Carol, last week, you have built 17 homes, right? And I saw you donating a home to a certain family. I saw the woman carrying the child, another child at her feet. How do you tell her that she can be a leader in her community when all she must be focusing is how to feed these two children? So these are things that we have to seriously question, and each of us take responsibility for a certain district, for a certain province, for a certain village, and work in a very, in a very small way, but creating big impact is critical. Because the stories of suffering of Sri Lankan women are endless. And unless we really stand up for one another, we cannot do it. And I know in this panel here, all my fellow sisters, they've done incredible work in the community, building houses, empowering youth, or giving spiritual and transformational workshops, and then advising businesses. What haven't we done? But still, we have to do more. So what we have, my simple message to every woman is, if you are out there, you are out there, but remember, you are powerful, way more powerful than you have ever can think of. Nobody has told you, but you have to. Sometimes we will meet angels and people on our way who will encourage us and believe in us, and our belief and their belief in us kicks in before we can believe in ourselves. And that happened many times. I was training myself to be a professional speaker, and I had so much doubt. I was thinking, what is the story I can tell? How can I create an impact? When my mentor, Les Brown, he's one of the world famous motivational speakers. I was speaking one day at an event, and I had just finished speaking. And then he walked up to me to the stage, and he said, I want to meet you for lunch. And then there we struck up a conversation, and he was a kind of a speaker I admired for years. And his belief in me kicked in before I could really believe that I could tell my story. And we worked for years just to tell one story. And that's the story of my son who was bullied, and how I realized that if my son was bullied, I had to wake up, I can't talk about bullying elsewhere. What about what was happening in my around my circles? And then how I began to tell my story. And friends, stories are critical. The other day I was speaking to the congresswoman from Colorado, and we were talking about how can we mobilize women to action. And she was telling me a profound story, which story I have told over 20 people now. And she was telling how she was working with the African American communities who had income, but they were not given housing. And one of the congressmen noticed her work and said, hey, it's not enough that you work and represent them. You have to become a leader yourself, and encouraged her to run for office. And that was her story. So our stories are powerful. My time is limited. So we will get into some questions and answers and clarifying. So remember that you are incredibly powerful, and you have to create a vision of what you really want to do. This is what sometimes we miss as women. We might be joining herds of women and not really taking time to reflect on ourselves and the message and the work that we can bring to the community. And this is daily work. So we can talk about leadership, how to craft it. And this is exactly what we are hoping to do with Wisdom Wednesdays. Our programs are not going to be confined only to the internet and virtual. Once the pandemic is done, we are hoping to go back from village to village. And this is why we are reaching out to you. This is serious work. And we want to educate our women and our young children that they are possible, they're good enough. How can we teach them democracy, citizenship, civic responsibility, leadership, and community service? These are the 4 pillars on which every one of us should stand on, and more so the women. So we will continue with our work, and our slogan is empower a woman to empower women, empower women, empower a woman to empower other women. So this is a journey. We are in this together, and let us make a resolve to fight this stronger, to be there and to show ourselves. Woody Allen said 80% of success is showing up. So how many of us are showing up for one another, showing up for ourselves? So let's continue the conversation. Blessed to be here. Thank you, Carol.
Yeah, Kamini, please go ahead.
Thanks, Sarah, so much for that. I mean, something that you said really struck me when you say women don't have time to look at themselves and think for themselves, in a sense, plan for themselves. And I think it comes from a strong social norming of how women are expected to serve the family. I mean, when you look at all, like even employment, like labor force participation reports, this is one of the key things that comes up. So what could we do on different levels? Because not everyone will want to be a politician. Not everyone will want to, and there are also different avenues on how you can create change. So I think there are 2 questions. This aspect of the social norm, anyway, like even as women individuals, how often do we think of ourselves and start from that point? And then, not everyone wants to become a politician, but do you have to become that to create change?
Great question, Kamini. Michelle Obama said, I don't have to be a politician to make change, So for us to recognize that it's not only politics, but politics, you can be a greater influencer. You don't have to be. But look at the situation with the DIG, for instance, right? How many of us could have written a letter, joined a protest movement if it was happening? Or how many of us could have reach the DIG, the petitioners who filed this case directly and appeal to them? This is not right. So there are so many ways in which, or how many of us could have organized a community gathering and discussed, is this right? even during the issue of the forced cremations that are still continuing. I call out on the Muslims in Sri Lanka. How many of you have even gone into the Sinhala communities and asked the Sinhala Buddhists, what do you have to say about this? You know, we are not doing enough of that outreach. So it doesn't have to manifest only in a political of in holding political office. There are so many ways in which we can raise our voices. Mary Gonzalez, who a famous community organizer, says, "Stop being a potted plant. You can all do something." So what is that something, you know? Today, of course, we are all conveniently, most of us are keyboard warriors. We forward something and then we wait for things to happen. So that's question number one. We can be engaged and active in many ways. Secondly, this message of, you know, women not having time, I think that is a serious situation, you know. We have to go back to our homes and really change that and give a new message to our women and children, and even to our husbands and spouses and men, you know. Just push your woman to leadership. If she can run the family, if she's cooking and taking care of the family so well, that's micro. In the macro world, she's going to do well. It's a simple message. And sometimes I feel we women have to take responsibility so much. We have not realized our power. Selvi?
Yes, I think for Kamani's question, I'm going to approach it from a different point of view. That is, one has to think of women not having anxiety, to be free from anxiety, and that comes with their basic needs being met. When you are free of anxiety, then you can actually look at yourself, do whatever is necessary for you to do, you know, enhance yourself. But they don't have time for that because they are foraging from day to day what to do and how to give food for the children and how to find a place to live. You know, a maid comes to my house and she's doing 3 jobs at the same time. And I ask her, why are you spending this time outside your home without being with your child? I just want to have a roof over my head. So I'm working so hard. See, if that anxiety was not there, she would be in a much better position to look at herself, look at her children, look at the house and get on with it. I think freedom from anxiety is very important, and that comes with their basic needs being met.
So Selvi, I'm going to give you the platform a little bit down the line to talk about that, you know, how you meet these basic needs. I want to go back and address what I think that's very important, Selvi, because I think not enough people look at that aspect of a woman's requirement, you know, because she's the primary responsible person to feed the family. Even though you say, you know, a man goes out and earns a living, etc., etc., the woman feels responsible for this whole unit to be held together. I want to go back to what something Kamani said, and also Soraya said, right? Soraya referred to, this fact that I build houses. And I want to tell you a little story. Yes, I build these houses, and I build these houses for mostly women-headed households, right? And we also talk, Soraya, about the need for us wisdom women to take this further than the internet. And our secondary plan is to go to the villages, go to these rural areas, go to where it's required to talk to the women so that we can uplift them. And we have this plan in mind, and it's in writing. We just need the funding to go ahead and do that. And we also need the COVID to settle to a great extent before we can actually get out there and ask people to come. It's not about just us going there, but about other women coming there, and we have to make sure that they are safe as well. So hopefully with the vaccine that's coming in, maybe some of those, you know, people still follow the requirements. Maybe we can come to that point sooner rather than later if we had the funding in place. Secondly, I want to tell you this message, how important this message is, Soraya. So this house, this family that I built the house for this time, it was a woman with 2 children. Husband left her when the second child when she was pregnant with the little one. And why? You know, she married at 15 years of age. So when I went to hand over the house, for the first time I saw a smile on her face. So whenever I hand these houses, I don't stay in touch with them, but I give them this little talk, that they've got a roof over their head, and now it's their responsibility to become stronger and to become mentally stronger and be a role model to their children, and to raise their children so that in such a way that they become a good social fit. In other words, not just to take what they can from the earth or from whoever they can, but to also give back. So when I arrived there to hand over the house, my mason boss told me, lady, this little boy, this is the 7-year-old little boy, he speaks very badly. And so also, before I get to that, there was a group of women who had come to meet me, and they said, lady, we heard you hand houses out, and so we came to tell you our sad story. There were 7 women from this area of maybe 20 families, 7 women whose husbands left them with children. And I was told that most of them got married very young. And then when the men came of age, they left them and married some other woman in another village, and left these women to fend for themselves and their children, right? Now you're talking 7 women with 2 or 3 children at least, who didn't have a man, who didn't have a male role model for the child. But look at what this child learned, right? My mason boss told me, lady, do you know this boy speaks very badly? Do you know what he said yesterday? And I'm going to repeat what he said. He said, the grandmother gave him some food to eat, and he said, topi kapang. I mean, a 7-year-old child, male child. How did he learn to speak to his grandmother like that? How did this 7-year-old male child think that he could speak so to a female adult who was actually taking care of him? I was absolutely astounded. I mean, this boy seemed so meek, so mild, very respectful when I went. But when I heard, and this is not the first time, Soraya, there are other houses that I've built for women where I found a similar reaction from the male child. So why, I want to ask you, why are we women failing if we are strong women? Are we not believing that we are strong enough to bring up our male children in such a way, and our girl children to be strong enough? So that is my question to you, Soraya. How do we reach out to these women to believe that they are strong enough to bring forth children, and bring them up in such a manner that they don't grow up to be these men who think they can react with impunity? Over to you.
Kamini had a hand up.
Yeah, I mean, no, Soraya, you go first and then I'll go.
Yeah, so this goes deeper into parenting, the values that were taught, and how they are, in what kind of environment they're living in. So yeah, it's a deeper problem, we can't just pluck some woman and say, hey, be a leader. So many forces have shaped her, and so many men, they have been shaped too by the way they were parented. So I don't know, are we going to do parenting classes in every session we do? This will go very deep, yeah, and a great question. It hurts that the culture of impunity, the culture of superiority, the culture of patriarchy is so entrenched at the grassroots level, and so it is at the top. So we in the middle, a thin slice of us wondering how to do this. We have to continue to do it. That's all I can think of and say, in no uncertain terms. We have to reach out and look at the stories of young girls like Malala. She was shot at point blank range, but she didn't give up. So how resilient we are, and to talk about these things, educated, is critical. Kamini, you had to say something, but I also say it's almost 6 o'clock.
Well,
Yeah,
I mean, thank you. No, what I wanted to talk about were two key things that really stood out with what Carol said. I mean, first for me was the child marriages and getting pregnant as teenage mothers. And we know in Sri Lanka, talking about sexual reproductive health is such a serious issue. Like there's so many, things that stop us from being able to have those conversations. So one, I think, did those girls at that young age, A, want to get married, or did they want to have children at that age? And I think it also stems back to the whole aspect of women and sexuality. Because I wanted to talk about it today because it's so important and integral when we talk about women, because women are so shamed to raise questions. If we do ask questions about sexuality, it's only about menstruation and maybe accessing a family planning method as we grow older. But clearly, child marriage is an issue in Sri Lanka. We tend to relegate it only to Muslim households, but it is an issue that cuts across the entire country, across all races and ethnic groups. And so, that the need to create an environment where, or allow people who want to provide more information on sexual reproductive health, education, etc., needs to really come forward. And also for women also to really connect with that strength of themselves also, instead of looking at it as, because we're made to look at it in a very negative way, our own sexuality. So maybe I'm teetering onto a different topic also, which maybe we can take up at a later date. But the second aspect that also really struck me was about this boy, and his behavior is not surprising at all. Because as Soraya said, we live in a country and a society where harmful, like, men work with impunity. Boys see this everywhere. They are conditioned. They see it on TV, they see it in media, they see it in decisions, the way decisions are made, the way decisions are enforced in our country across all levels. So it really goes into the crux of how much do we also want to work with men? Because if I were to go on to the key area I wanted to talk about, I mean, also which touches on what Soraya spoke of, women not only want to feed their children, they want to also look into their safety. And one of the key elements for women that prevents them from feeling safe is the risk of gender-based violence. And it is so pervasive in our country. We see it in our homes, we see it as intimate partner violence. I won't be talking about the rates, but we know it's there. I mean, and also in societies, we talk about high rates of sexual harassment in public transport. And also as women who have tried to come forward in politics, how they experience sexual and gender-based violence. I mean, we saw this during the local government elections. And also now the most recent example is on DIG Bhimshani, how the structural violence is coming in. So it's pervasive and it cuts across so many levels. And the impact of it is, you have the mental impact, the physical, even death by even suicide or homicide. And we don't talk about it. We don't create enough space. And also children, girls who experience it, abuse, for example, or witness it, are likely to normalize it and assume that it is okay to stay in harmful or unhealthy relationships as they grow older. And research has shown, even in Sri Lanka, that boys who have experienced abuse or witnessed abuse in families are likely to perpetrate intimate partner violence as they grow older. So, and it's strange because in a way we're saying that half of our population who are women, I mean, I know that all of us have experienced at least one sort of gender-based violence in our lifetime. That's a minimum. And also men do experience gender-based violence, but the most of it is experienced by women. And why does this happen? It's when women challenge patriarchal norms within all these structures. And we also call it a trigger in intimate partner violence. Say when a woman questions her husband, sometimes it's been enough to trigger him to perpetrate intimate partner violence. And when you question their decision-making or challenge their role, and on the other side, if women are not within the box of what is expected of a woman, and if they're strong, if they display masculine traits, I mean, we all have feminine and masculine traits, strength and all of that, which we're forced into these boxes with violence, with gender-based violence. But what is most interesting for me is, yes, I know there's a lot of work that happens around working with women, empowering them. But for me, what has to go hand in hand with that is working with men, because the common thread is that men feel a sense of impunity to perpetrate violence against women in all spaces. And violence is an act of power. And I mean, if I were to just resort to some of the statistics of a study that I led when I was at Care International many years ago, it was called Broadening Gender, Why Masculinities Matter. And out of the survey, in the survey too, we asked the question, how many men perpetrated sexual violence, including rape? And 14% of the men admitted to it. And amongst them, they were asked, okay, what were the key motivations for perpetrating rape? And 60% of the men said it was sexual entitlement. So where is this sense of sexual entitlement coming from? It's fed by this whole notion that from childhood, men can be sexually entitled to do whatever they want without any impunity. And I believe that if we deconstruct that harmful masculine trait from a young age, we can change things, I mean, and substantially reduce violence against women. And then also within this group, they were asked how old were they when they perpetrated their first rape. And 30% of this group were within the age of 15 to 19, which is young people. And just let that set in. I mean, young people, young boys, their sexual experience as young people is through violence. And then the larger group was 60%, where they were in the age range of 20 to 60. And in our analysis, we felt that it also captured a lot of marital rape. And in Sri Lanka, you know that marital rape has not been criminalized. And among these men who perpetrated rape, only 2% faced any legal consequences. That means 98% of them just went on with their lives. And just imagine for a woman who has experienced it, if you're living with your perpetrator, if the perpetrator is living next door, what does that do for you? And what does that do to your mental status? I mean, how can you continue to work with your maximum productivity? How can you it's really tough. And if you don't have proper, some of us work in pilot projects around preventing violence, working with men and boys. And also we need to strengthen GBV responses. So that women don't feel victimized or re-victimized, or are not re-victimized when they report cases of gender-based violence. So I think, for me, I feel that there's a huge lacuna in terms of working with men and holding them accountable, saying, look, I heard on the radio this morning, I heard on Sri Lankan news, someone saying, oh, some famous athlete was found to have, or personality had been found to perpetrate rape years ago, and it's coming up. And he said, and his sentence was, he needs to deal with this mistake. And I was like, mistake? He's committed a crime. He needs to be held accountable. How can you make it such a light thing? And so it's so pervasive, and all of us in a way enable it to be this way. So yeah, those are the things I wanted to share about, impediments for women's empowerment.
Yeah, I think partly, what Selvi was saying, I let Selvi speak to that. I think this, when women become stronger and their needs are met, and for instance, Selvi wants to talk about basic income. I think when women become independent in some ways, I think perhaps they can address these issues better, because I think women also play a big role in stepping back and allowing these men to take the lead. There's nothing wrong with that if that's the way you want it, but I think women can do so much more if they mentally think they can have the confidence to do what they want to do. Selvi?
Yes, thank you, Carol. I'm going to just touch on some aspects of women as custodians of future generations and taking action against their unpaid labor work. We've heard a lot about women's unpaid labor in the house and how it supports society, how it supports economy, but they are not recognized or given adequate remuneration for it. Now, in my point of view, for empowering, education is very important. And building their career, having a livelihood which they can use to support is important. Through entrepreneurship training and skills training is important. And then women's political participation and leadership roles in decision making is important, right? And of course, their voices need to be heard. They have to be networking, bringing themselves together, forming societies, unions, whatever. And they have to actually be empowered by technology. But for me, out of all this, the most important way in which you can empower women is to support their role in shaping the future generations, taking action against their unpaid work. Why do I say this? Because the most powerful influence for the woman's recognition of their fundamental biological role of producing the future generation. Recognition means to help, reward, and financially sustain the human procreation process in all its facets. Now that means, first of all, I think Kamini actually stole the words from my mouth. She's already introduced you to it, but I quickly go through it. Removing the shame element from menstruation and provide adequate toilet facilities, materials like sanitary pads in poor homes, nutrition for use when the menstruation happens, 1 point. Second, the individual woman, the power of decision making about family planning and abortion. The woman should have the power to decide about family planning and abortion. Provide adequate resources like midwives, health centers, hospitals for the provision of maternal and child health. Recognize and reward the multifarious activities performed by women in the house in order to sustain the family and especially the children by their unpaid labor. Provide easy and accessible access to childcare for women who want career prospects. Make available, most importantly, basic amenities needed for women to give care to their children and their other dependents. That is food, water, clean air, clothes, and a roof over their head. And I'm adding education to it of their children. Now, once this is provided for every female-headed household or even a male-headed household, the woman actually then enjoys her choice, enjoys the freedom to make a choice in what she wants to do and how she wants to bring up the children. And this gives her the freedom from anxiety, which again, is the important facility or important precondition for her to be self-enhancing, to be looking at herself and making herself be the best she can be at any point in time. And then finally, it gives her access to markets and financial inclusivity. I think this is very important. Kamini was making a point that men feel that they have sexually entitled. What does make them feel that way? It is the vulnerability, the financial vulnerability of the woman who cannot take decisions for herself that makes them think, that I am entitled to her and her sexual favors because I am bringing in the money. Now, I'm making a case for basic income in order to address these. All these points will be addressed. The 7 points I made will be addressed by basic income if women are given basic income. Now, when you give basic income to a woman, it gives them freedom of choice to procreate when and how they want, to fashion the future generations in their own terms. Now, what is basic income now? Basic income is a sum of money paid for the basic needs of all men and women. I'm considering this for the benefit of the women, but basic income idea is for all people, all men and women, without having to work for it. That means it's not a wage. We say basic income is a right of a human being in order to live with dignity as a human being without having the shackles of poverty. As you know, poverty can completely steal your dignity, and you can do so many things under the grip of poverty. Now, basic income is thought to be the biggest idea of the 21st century. And I can assure you, this is going to be the order in the future. It will definitely come into place. This is part of a worldwide movement that has been gaining momentum from 2017 onwards. And although this idea has been around for centuries now, because it has been seen as a basic tenet of a utopia, an ideal society. Like, for instance, Thomas Paine wrote in his Utopia that everybody should get a basic income so that they live with dignity. Martin Luther King talked about it. Thomas Jefferson talked about it. Abraham Lincoln, he said that people should be given a basic income. Bertrand Russell, Milton Friedman, and John Maynard Keynes, who are also economists, and Richard Nixon, and so on and so forth. So everybody actually has supported it, but it has never happened because of certain things that have actually made it difficult to implement it. But 2017 has seen an upsurge in the idea, and people are now taking to it a lot. And I think Rich was mentioning about the presidential candidate who has taken that as his mandate. He said, if I come in as governor of his own state, Mississippi, I think, that I will bring basic income for all people in my state. So it is actually gaining momentum. Now, many things that happen with basic income is people think that it's not possible, because how do you distribute money to everybody? Is it feasible? How will people become lazy and do no work, and so on and so forth? So thousands of basic income pilot studies has been done in this world so far, and it is still being done. And I can tell you all the results from all these schemes, thousands of schemes, actually show how it reduces poverty and how women are benefited by it more than men. Women and children gain a lot more than men. Let me just quickly go through. There was Hawaii, there is one. Alaska, as you know, there is a basic income dividend for every citizen in the country. It was debated in Davos in 2017. San Francisco voted for basic income to reduce carbon footprint. It has an impact on the environment. Namibia pilot is a very successful pilot. Kenyan pilot has going on for 18 years. It's still happening. Ontario pilot started, but for some administrative reasons, it has stopped. Finland pilot was successful. Nigeria has rolled out a pilot. And also, I'd like to let you know, there was a pilot study in India and also in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is considerably small, which was actually carried out by Poonam Foundation. And so I'm going to just deal with Sri Lanka and India because it's closer to our home. So what happened in Indian pilot is that in 2011, 8 villages in Madhya Pradesh, there were 6,000 people were given basic income for 18 months. The result of the scheme was that women took over the money because it was being paid to the women. And first thing they made was they improved the houses, their own houses. They put tiles over the roof and they built latrines. Why latrines? Because of their need for proper amenities during menstruation period. and that those latrines were the most important thing that happened in all these villages. And improvement in nutrition and weight for age among children and girls improved, and improved health and increased school attendance. Children started going to school because mother has money, so they don't have to go to work, so they go to school. So there is complete sort of peace in the house, right? And then there's one very important positive outcome in the Indian scheme: equity outcomes. Women who came for meetings for these basic income projects, first they were covering their faces, they were standing outside, only the men were at the meetings. But after 6 months of basic income being given to the women as well as men, the women thought, now we are equal. So they took off their veils, they came and sat down with the men, and they started deciding on where should the well go, what should be the, how much should be the this, and all the decisions were now being shared between men and women. Why? There was, patriarchy, we do say patriarchy is a problem, but patriarchy is a problem because of the income distribution, which is not equal. Once both men and women were given equal salaries, equal income, women started coming onto the fore, and at the end of the 18 months, it was women who were running the whole show. So these bigger improvements in socio-economic status of women, elderly women, particularly the low-caste women and the disabled, this was amazing sort of changes that happened. And of course, women started doing small-scale investment, more growth in production in the village. People started not less migration. They didn't go outside. They started staying in the village and improving the village. And they became more self-employed, and they became less wage labor because they had money. So they invested and they became self-employed. Reduction in bonded labor, and there was reduction in debt. All these debt and all these people who are lending money and extracting awesome interest from the villagers now said that was a bad job for them, this scheme, right? So this was an Indian pilot was an extremely good, successful scheme, which showed how women were empowered and they had peace of mind. They had less anxiety in the house, and they became more open. They took leadership roles in the community, and they started dictating terms as to what should happen, where should the well be, and all that. Sri Lankan pilot is a very small pilot because Poonam Foundation actually managed to get some donors to give basic income for about 3 widows and 2 artists in the first phase, and about 5 widows and 2 artists in the second phase. And the widows and the artists were given 10,000 a month for 2 years. And we have been gathering results, and our results are very, very similar to the Indian results. The same thing happened. Women became empowered, the children became more nourished, and they had good attendance at school, and so on and so forth. So my point is, if you want to empower women, get basic income implemented. Support the basic income movement, and please, I can answer any questions you want on this subject.
I know we're running out of time, Carol, but I just want to share one word that we want our listeners to take away from what Selvi said and what we should all remember. Equity. Equity is fairness. A fairness principle happened here. Women were given a basic income that they were denied. So we are not saying like in the DIG situation where you're not qualified, therefore you can't get this job. No, we are demanding for equity, fairness. There are so many times the reasons that we have not been able to level the playing field. So remember this word equity, ladies, if you are listening, always we have to demand for fairness. Thank you.
Thank you, Soraya. That's a good point.
Thank you, Selvi. I mean, you've taken the wind off my sails. In fact, these are some of the similar areas that I wanted to say today as well. And I fully agree with you and Kamani. That was my point too, that we have to start with the boys actually nowadays. I mean, that's where the difference could come in the household and in the society at large. Yeah.
Thank you, Fazana.
Yeah, Fazana, I think you were going to talk about whether educating girls versus boys. It brings back to maybe this making an equal partnership between girls and boys here. That each get this equal share, literally, which will help both sides grow. So over to you, Fazana.
Yeah, I mean, investing in girls' education transforms communities, countries, and the entire world. Girls who receive an education are less likely to marry young, like we discussed in the beginning, and more likely to lead healthy, productive lives. They earn high incomes, participate in decisions that most affect them, and build better futures for themselves and their families. So, because women have this innate quality in them where they can manage, juggle, and are frugal with funds. So, girls' education ends up strengthening economies and reduces inequality. It contributes to more stable, resilient societies that will give all individuals, including boys and men, the opportunity to fulfill their potential. I mean, you can really see even in a single woman-headed household, if she has a son and a daughter, both will be focused on by the mother. But I wouldn't say the same if there was no female figure in that house, sadly, and that's the honest truth. But education for girls is also more than access to school, in my opinion. It's also about girls feeling safe in classrooms and supported in the subjects and careers they choose to pursue, including those in which they are often underrepresented. Female pilots, female engineers, people who have to do a 24-hour shift. If they want to, they need to be supported. Even martial arts, things that are perceived male dominated. The sad part is worldwide, there are about 132 million girls who are out of school. Only 66% of countries have achieved gender parity in primary education. At the secondary level, the gap widens. 45% of countries have achieved gender parity in lower secondary education and only 25% in upper secondary education. So, I mean, we think, the West is better, but this is worldwide. There is an issue in this parity of access to education for girls. So the reasons are many. Barriers to girls' education includes like poverty, child marriage, what we discussed early on in the show, gender-based violence. These vary among countries and communities. Poor families often favor boys when investing in education. I mean, uh, a father with limited resources would think of educating his son and marrying his daughter away. So in some places, schools also do not meet the safety, hygiene, and sanitation needs for girls. In others, teaching practices are not gender responsive and result in gender gaps in learning and skill development. So these are many issues that girls face. Now in Sri Lanka, I had some statistics around for 2017 where only 55% of the boys who did A-levels were qualified to enter university, whereas 72% of the girls were qualified to enter university. And even in university, only 37% are boys and the balance, 63% are girls. And girls come out in all fields except technology and engineering. In all other areas, there are more girls qualifying than boys. So again, you can see, and a lot of girls going to arts, and even some research I've done in the past, a lot of focus groups have shown that many girls resort to be teachers, nurses, then teachers, and then banking. Those are the three preferred areas. So there is again this whole stigma that they cannot access into other more challenging roles. This has a wider area to discuss, and I could like take the whole day on this discussion. It's also to do with how does the workplace support women, and how does the home front culturally support women when they work? Do men play an equal role in household chores, bringing up children, cooking, cleaning? Does that allow both parties to have equity in having going to work? So, and also at work, if the woman or man wants to bring a child to work, is there creche facilities? Is there working from home? Working from home, which I spoke about in a previous show as well, has broken a lot of glass ceilings now with COVID. all the HR directors who said we cannot allow working from home are now compelled to, and it's quite working fine. We did have initial issues, but we are working fine. And I also want to touch on women entrepreneurs. Not only professionals, but women entrepreneurs can lead to a tremendous social change, as Selvi also spoke on, making women financially empowered and independent. This can increase levels of confidence and happiness in women, and a happy home, create a happy home. All the satisfaction of achievement and self-sufficiency can boost their self-esteem and overall well-being. Direct women into high growth areas is one of the key areas, because we need to support women entrepreneurs and support them and lead them in the right direction. And this should be one of the key focus areas, not just merely making them become entrepreneurs. So there are a lot of obstacles for successful women entrepreneurs, but the most countries, when you look at a cross section of studies, one of the key areas is the lack of leadership to guide them as entrepreneurs, capital, lack of access to capital, professionalism, to find affordable solutions like childcare once they are being entrepreneurs as well. So these are areas we have to support in terms of, creating women as entrepreneurs. To wind up, I just wanted to share, and I think Soraya, you touched on Malala, but one of the intriguing factors about the Malala story for me was Malala's father, Yusuf Zai, who is the author of a book, Let Her Fly, A Father's Journey, a memoir about his fight for women's rights in Pakistan and his relationship with his daughter Malala. So how Malala became this courageous girl was actually her father who was behind her. So he says, long before my daughter Malala Yousafzai was born, long before we began fighting for girls' rights to education together, and long before the Taliban's brutal attack on her brought the world's attention to her story, I made a decision. Growing up in a village in Shangla, northern Pakistan, I was surrounded by patriarchy. I had 5 sisters and a brother, and I saw how we boys got better shoes, more clothes, and tastier cuts of chicken than the girls. I saw how my mother couldn't go out unescorted, and on documents like doctor's prescriptions was never referred to by her name, but as mother of so-and-so, mother of the son, or wife of her husband. And worst of all, I saw how I go to school, while my sisters stayed at home, crippling their future. So this has struck me the most, and this is what we need to change, and this is what Kamani spoke on as well. Thank you.
I think that's such an amazing story, because yes, I too thought about that. Her father was just so awesome and continues to support Malala, and I think, we always look to the mothers, but we don't, the fathers don't take this role very seriously, that they need to push their girl children, to bigger heights. And as always, we are coming to the end of the hour. We can be talking for hours. There's so many questions to ask Selvi and Fazana. Unfortunately, time is running out. I just want to tell everybody who's tuned in, Kamini, who's been with us from inception, is taking a step back, as I said, for a short time, because she wants to put more attention to her baby, which is Shanti Margam. As you all know, it's Kamini's dream to create Shanti Margam, and she needs to take some time to do that. We wish you well, Kamini, but please, whenever you have the time, we want you back here. And as soon as you've got Shanti Margam on a footing, please come back to us, because we need you. And on that, thank you so much to everybody who always has been watching, asking us questions, and being sending supportive comments after the fact. We are going to put some information on our Facebook page about strong women, because we haven't been able to, speak to every subject that we wanted to. Please join us next time on the 12th of March. That's the second Wednesday of the month, for the next program of Wisdom Wednesdays.
And 8th March is International Women's Day.
There you go. So
Every
maybe
day
that's
should be
some hot
International
button
Women's
topics,
Day.
right? Yeah, hot button topics then. So on behalf of the panel, we say thank you very much for joining us. Please be with us on our next forum. and support our journey forward to build this movement by telling everybody to join in as well. Bye, everyone.